Welcome back, everyone, to Engaging India at Almedalen. In this session, the next session, we're going to focus from Sambandh to scaling. We're going to focus on scaling climate action. And we'll begin with a fireside chat. For that, may I request on stage Klaus Kunz, Executive Leader and Senior Sustainability Advisor, who's traveled from Germany to be with us today. Klaus is the head of global development at PI Industries and also the founder of EPRUN, supporting sustainable businesses with the making a transformation.
Thank you.
I'm joined by my colleague, Swaminathan, who was introduced earlier. Swami, interesting intersection that you sort of dabble in, which is between academia, research, advising on policy, as well as corporate leadership. So we hope that you will bring in some of those questions in this fireside chat and later on in the panel as well. So over to you, gentlemen.
Thank you so much, Rupali, and a warm welcome, Klaus. And I must say that yesterday, last night, when we were at dinner, we ended up talking a lot. It was a freewheeling conversation, and we've only had freewheeling conversations till now. And we realized that we all have dabbled between both Klaus and I. We must have dabbled in 10 odd areas. And then he said, "Oh, you seem to be cut from the same cloth." Right? So a bit of policy, bit of research, bit of think tank work, a lot of corporate work. So that's who we are, and I hope to have a very freewheeling conversation with you, Klaus. So today is, it seems like a big topic, right? Climate resilient food system. So how do we create a climate resilient food system? So I want to start off with something very, very insightful that I realized that came to me. It's like going ahead and looking at climate change from the other way, right? So we tend to think of climate change as something which is gloom and doom, droughts, fires, wildfires, which cannot really. California wildfire was, for example, an illustrative example, right? And then I ended up going with a very close friend of mine, a former colleague, Pararne, to around 30 kilometers from here in Gotland. And then I saw wine grapes, Merlot grapes, blue grapes being grown in Gotland. Right? 10 years back, 15 years back, that would have been unheard of, unthinkable. So Gotland seems to be probably in the first steps of being a wine-producing region. And grapes is a Mediterranean crop, right? So what does climate resilience mean for you?
I mean, I would say, what you point out is very important, because people tend to think everything in binary, in good and bad, in 1 and 0. And of course, every time there's a change, in the change there's something positive and there's something negative. And we had that conversation yesterday evening. The only impossible thing and the greatest innovation ever would be preservation, because it's actually not possible to preserve something. It's always evolving. So there's intrinsic evolution all the time. And maybe it's very important from time to time to remember ourselves that that's the fact and that things are changing. However, I'm a firm believer that we need to step up massively in our efforts, not to preserve, but to avoid massive damage, because, as we said, preservation is probably not possible. And it's not only about climate, it's about biodiversity. It's all those factors, the planetary boundaries, where I think we need to make a lot more. So this is, it starts with everybody acknowledging, looking at himself, herself, acknowledging, like, where is my share?
Right.
Where can I make a contribution, and then joining the broader conversation?
Right. So that's the big question, Klaus. I think you've answered it quite well. I just want to stay with it for probably another 30 seconds or so, right? So from what I hear from you, and I'm interpreting you, please feel free to correct me. It's almost as if that the climate will do whatever it wants to do, right? The earth changes, it will change. It's probably been changing from its inception, right? So the resilience is more towards us. it's a self-reflective question. So what does, in the current scheme of things, how can we become more resilient? Does it mean that we need to change our thought, our ways of life? Please.
Yes. Yeah, changing the thought by, first of all, trying to anticipate what will come. I think we are not good in anticipating what will come because we're all trying to be tied and to tie ourselves back into what was. It's one of the reasons why, and I may say this, maybe a good moment to say that, why I wanted to join an Indian company. Because I felt the willingness to accept that the future is different from the past is very high. The appetite actually is even high for having a different future than the past. While the appetite in Europe for changing into a different future is very low. I'm from Germany, so I don't know about Sweden, but I would have that suspicion that it's maybe not so different from Germany, that we are afraid of the change, while in India I was sensing a much stronger appetite for change. And if you now want to anticipate what would be a better future, once again, I think it's very important that everybody starts to acknowledge that he or she sits into a bubble of assumptions, talks to other people in the same bubble where nobody's challenging those assumptions. And the only way to get yourself out of this bubble is have cross-functional, cross-cultural, cross-regional and cross-finance industry regulatory conversations and allow others to challenge your core assumptions.
Perfect. So now, it's like the big question, and I'm sort of narrowing it down. It'll get more and more tighter. So it's my intention is not to put you on a spot, but to ask all those hard questions.
I can say this. I worked for Bayer. I was on the spot. I'm used to that.
Okay, perfect. So that's great. So taking your thought process forward and trying to make it much more practical, right? I'm a coffee person. I need my coffee in the morning. I need my coffee in the afternoon. I need my coffee in the evening. I've just about finished a cup of coffee, right? And I do realize, and these are very good estimates, research-based estimates, that just a single cup of coffee is 140 liters of water, right? And I'm standing in a place where not a single bean of coffee grows. And it doesn't grow in Europe too. Grand Canaria doesn't get included.
Not yet.
Not yet, right? So I'm now coming back to a food system. Now I'm able to drink coffee and afford it and probably take it for granted simply because of the fact that there's a food system that's allowing me to get a cup of coffee. But that's 140 liters of water, right? So how does one look at a food system? Is it a food system change that we need to look at?
The biggest challenge that having worked in the food system for 20 years, I have observed is that people are not able to describe trade-offs. It's impossible for people to talk in trade-offs. They like as I said in the beginning, binary, organic is good, conventional is bad. Local is good, international is bad, globalized is bad. So they talk they like to talk in those terms, but we need to acknowledge that nothing goes without a trade-off. Simple example, when people say, I have a biodiversity positive agriculture, this doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. In the moment you try to grow on one piece of land, one specific crop more than others, but agriculture typically does, you are reducing biodiversity by definition. And I think that honesty would be very important, that everybody is leaving that place to acknowledge that what I do has benefits and risks, and go out of this good and bad into a risk-benefit conversation. And then we are going to be able to describe the coffee problem from multiple aspects. And this is maybe where you want me to get there anyway. This is where AI can chime in, because we are not able to capture all the trade-offs. Intellectually, it's too complicated. How can the future, something, a machine help us to better capture trade-offs without bias? And I have severe hopes that AI can significantly help us to overcome all these biases that we have when we describe this is a good and this is a bad system, and go into much more an outcome-driven rather than an input-determined conversation. That's another very simple example when we talk about climate-resilient food systems. If people say it should be organic, I say why? Or conventional, I also say why, because these are just describing input parameters. Is it organic? It means like the input you use is coming from nature, while if it's conventional, you say the input you use is coming from a laboratory. What is actually the point? The point is more what is the outcome? How can we describe an outcome? How can we describe an outcome from different angles? Water is one of them. Social dimensions are others. I mean, we still want people to sell coffee and to trade coffee also. Trade is a very important element in the whole equitation, but it's only one element in the equitation. Nutrition, I mean, all those elements, how can we bring them in a way that we have a balanced decision at the end of the day and we can really describe acknowledging that the perfect solution doesn't exist. This is so far out of the corridor that we should not do this anymore.
Perfect. So sort of, I think you've covered a broad spectrum. So I'll, in my way, let me sort of try and focus on something, right? Food is critical and it's critical for survival. So we know food. We've always been eating food. So if you look at evolution, food has been a critical part of evolution. Lack of food, too much food, it sort of determines how the human evolution has taken place over a period of time. Different geographies, different groups. But in modern times, food is agriculture, and agriculture is a business model. Food doesn't seem to be farming. Is there a fundamental difference there? So do you see this as a business model problem, or do you see this as a practices problem?
And maybe I tie it back to climate resilient and how we can come to a climate resilient food system, and how we can put like one measure at the core which helps us to determine whether it's climate resilient or not, and then all the other answers on how should we design the food business model should be linked to that. I believe the most important measure whether in agriculture has an acceptable impact on the ecosystem or not is the soil quality. And people say, yeah, but then water and then biodiversity. I say, if the soil quality is good, all the other parameters are going to be better as well. You can really nail it down into the soil quality. And if you have a business model which is negative for biodiversity, if you have areas in the world, and there are enough of those areas where you only grow 1 or 2 crops all the time, soy and corn, I mean, for example, then this is really negative for the soil. This is soil degenerating and not regenerating. Consequently, it's bad. And then the whole business system needs to be adopted, but then also you as consumers need to accept that the meat in the supermarket will be more expensive, because it's not building a system to provide food. It's a system to provide cheap meat. How do we transition from a system where we all want to have our very cheap chicken in the supermarket to a system where we want to pay adequately for chicken and also enable farmers to have different cropping systems than soy and corn until the cows come home? I think that is one of the key questions which cannot be put on the shoulders of the farmer. As you say, nobody talks about the farmer and his business. Everybody talks about the price in the supermarket.
Correct. So let me stay with that clause, and probably it's something which has occurred to a lot of people, but maybe not really articulated, right? So the fact that you're talking about cheap chicken, cheap beef, cheap pork, whatever, cheap meat, right? And in some form or the other, the meat itself is the villain, not the cheap part of it, right? But meat is a good source of protein. A lot of communities eat meat. They eat chicken, right? So again, my question remains the same. Are we battling a business model, or are we battling a product? Say in this case, meat.
Yeah.
Is it our convenience of just picking up something from the shelf? Is that what is determining our lack of cognitive change? We understand the data is there. So this is a room full of people who understand data. Yet we are questioning the meat and not the cheap part of it is the way I'm understanding it. It's a little bit of a controversial question, but
No,
you
it's
may,
not
you
a
may pick it up.
controversial question because I think both things come together. I mean, people have, on the one hand, traditional ways of nutrition. They have traditional ways of how they want to be fed. They have a traditional menu which has 5 times in a week meat on the plate, by the way, which is not traditional because, I mean, 50, 60 years ago, people did not have as much meat on their plate, also not in Europe. So it is more like we are used to it and maybe our parents were used to it. It's what we are used to combined with the convenience to have it. And I don't know how to break this cycle. I think it is possible to break the cycle. I think it's possible to come to different incentivation schemes for farmers because this is where, the farmer is treating the soil. No one else is treating the soil. How can farmers have a different incentivation scheme for different cycles of rotation, which include more crops, which will lead to better nutrition for all of us? In the end of the day, it's a plus for everybody.
Right.
For everybody. If we are able to change our preferences.
Yeah. And final question, Klaus, and then we can wrap up because I've been shown that 1 minute.
Yeah, I saw too.
So you mentioned soil health, and I think it's a very important point. So when we look at farming or agriculture, we look at input as land and water and equipment, but nobody says soil. So quite clearly from whatever experience that I've had, soil health is not measured and it's not a metric in any agricultural agro-processing company, right? It's not there at this point.
It's not there, but
Yeah.
it has to come.
It has to come. So how do you do that? How do you do that?
I mean, and that's a very important question because already when we started to measure carbon, which is only one component in soil, it's only one component. Minerals, all these other elements are part of a healthy soil. But already carbon, we were struggling because there was overpromise, carbon credits, like we can do all kinds of tons of sequestration. And it turned out after a couple of years or even couple of months that all those promises were not accurate. So I think, once again, it will take a moment where the industry world, the finance world, and the regulatory world come together and define in a reasonable way and not in a way like where in Europe, honestly speaking, with the CSRD, there were not enough experts on the table. It was regulatory people driven by the desire to impose these regulations. If the finance people are doing it, they don't understand agriculture either. If only the industry doing it, it's going only into their own pockets and advantages. They all need to come together and define what is the soil measurement system that we need. And it cannot be stable as well. It will evolve over time. But those parameters need to be defined. A nutritious soil will provide nutritious food and bring health to all people.
Thank you so much, Klaus. I know that we can continue this conversation for the entire day, but thank you so much for coming here and appreciate your inputs and thoughts.